My sister Olivia looked radiant in her white gown, all lace and pearls and 23-year-old optimism. I watched her from my assigned seat at table 12, the family overflow section tucked safely near the kitchen doors, where the catering staff rushed past with trays of champagne I absolutely could not afford to drink. The Grand Ballroom in downtown Chicago was everything a wedding venue should be. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. It was the kind of place that whispered of old money and new beginnings. I had left Chloe with Sarah 3 hours ago. My 5-year-old daughter's disappointed face was still fresh in my mind. She had wanted to come. She wanted to wear the burgundy dress we found at the thrift store to see Aunt Olivia get married, but Sarah, my best friend and absolute lifesaver, had convinced me otherwise. Formal weddings and kindergartners rarely mixed well. Better to keep Chloe home where she could watch her favorite animated movies and avoid the family scrutiny that would inevitably fall entirely on me. That scrutiny had started the exact moment I walked through the heavy oak doors at 7:30, alone, 28 years old, a single mother wearing a dress I had bought 2 years ago that still looked decent provided you did not examine the hemline too closely. My cousin Harper had swept past me in the receiving line. Her designer maternity gown clung perfectly to her curves, showing off a 7-month pregnancy that she wore like a glittering crown. Her husband, who also happened to be my ex-husband, had given me a nod so brief it barely qualified as an acknowledgement. Carter, the man who had walked out when my pregnancy test came back positive, the man who had married my wealthy cousin just 6 months later, the man who now stood across the ballroom looking like he had never made the biggest mistake of his life, holding a glass of scotch and laughing with my uncles. Meanwhile, I worked grueling 12-hour shifts at the pediatric hospital, came home to a daughter who asked why she didn't have a daddy, and tried not to calculate how many extra night shifts I would need to cover next month's heating bill. Evelyn, darling, you came alone. My mother's voice carried that particular pitch that managed to sound deeply concerned and utterly disappointed simultaneously. She appeared at my table during the cocktail hour, my father trailing behind her with the same uncomfortable expression he always wore when forced to acknowledge his eldest daughter's failures. We had hoped you might bring someone, Evelyn. There are several eligible men here from the Vance Corporation. You remember them, don't you? I am perfectly fine, Mom. I forced a smile that made my cheeks ache. Chloe sends her love to Olivia. Oh yes, the baby. My mother's use of the word baby for my 5-year-old daughter spoke volumes. Sarah is watching her, I assume. Such a shame you cannot afford a proper nanny. They moved on before I could formulate a polite response circulating among guests who actually mattered, family members who had made something of themselves, and then there was me, the pediatric nurse, who dropped out of medical school the second she got pregnant, who lived in a cramped, one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that real estate agents optimistically described as up and coming. Dinner was interminable, 7 courses of rich food I barely tasted, while conversations swirled around me like a suffocating fog. The couple to my left discussed their winter vacation home in Aspen. The woman across from me casually showed off a diamond tennis bracelet that probably cost more than my entire yearly salary. I smiled, I nodded, I wondered if anyone would even notice if I slipped out the side door. Then came the dancing. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, dark clouds had gathered over Chicago's skyline. The weather forecast had promised clear skies, but nature clearly had other plans. Thunder rumbled in the distance, barely audible over the romantic music. Within minutes, heavy rain began lashing against the glass, turning the vibrant city lights into abstract streaks of blurred color. "May I have this dance?" Carter's voice right behind me made every single muscle in my body lock into place. I turned slowly to find him standing there alone. Harper was presumably taking a bathroom break or holding court somewhere with her gaggle of wealthy admirers. No, thank you. I kept my voice perfectly level. Professional. It was the exact same tone I used with difficult, demanding parents in the pediatric ward. Come on, Evie, for old time's sake. He was using that boyish charm that had worked so flawlessly on me once upon a time, long before I realized that charm was absolutely all he had to offer. We can be adults about this. We are being adults. I am declining your invitation. I turned back toward the dance floor, desperately hoping he would take the hint and leave me in peace. He didn't. You know, it doesn't have to be like this between us. I know I made mistakes back then, but Carter. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the sheer weight of this entire charade. Go back to your pregnant wife. Dance with her. Leave me alone. My pregnant wife, who is actually carrying my legitimate child, he said softly. And there it was, the venom, the cruelty that always lurked just beneath his polished charm. Unlike the mistake that cost you your medical degree, I should have slapped him. I should have caused a massive scene right there at table 12. I should have done anything other than stand there frozen while he smirked and walked away seamlessly, rejoining Harper at the edge of the dance floor. She looked at me across the crowded room, one perfectly manicured hand resting protectively on her rounded belly, and smiled a smile made of pure ice. The music shifted to a slower, more intimate melody. Couples filled the floor, swaying together under the warm glow of the chandeliers, while the violent storm outside perfectly matched the one building in my chest. I sank back into my hard wooden chair and tried very, very hard not to cry in front of 200 people who already pitied me. That was when I noticed him. He stood near the sleek marble bar, entirely apart from the crowd, yet somehow commanding the attention of the entire room. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with dark hair cut short and a broad-shouldered build that suggested he spent serious time in a private gym. His suit was midnight black and flawlessly tailored, but it was his face that made my breath catch. Sharp, aristocratic cheekbones, a jawline that could have been carved from unforgiving stone, and eyes that even from across the massive ballroom seemed to see straight through every single defense I had spent 5 years constructing. He was watching me, not subtly, not with the passing polite curiosity of a stranger at a wedding. He was studying me with a dark, burning intensity that should have made me deeply uncomfortable, but instead sent a completely different kind of shiver racing down my spine. I looked away first, heat rapidly rising in my cheeks. When I dared to glance back, he was speaking quietly with someone from the groom's family. They exchanged a few tense words, and then the breathtaking stranger began moving deliberately through the crowd, directly toward me. My first instinct was flight, to grab my cheap clutch, make a flimsy excuse about checking on Chloe, and run out into the storm. But some invisible gravity kept me frozen in my seat while he crossed the ballroom with the terrifying confidence of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. He stopped at my table. Up close he was devastating. Those eyes I had noticed from afar were light brown, almost the color of aged whiskey in the chandelier light. A faint thin scar marked his chin on the right side. It was barely visible, but it somehow added danger to his perfection. He smelled of expensive cedarwood clean rain and power. "You have been sitting alone all evening," he said. His voice was a deep, rich baritone that washed over me like dark velvet. "That seems like a tragic waste." "I am fine," I managed to say, though my pulse was currently hammering against my throat. "Thank you for your concern." "I do not think you are fine." He pulled out the chair directly beside me without asking permission and sat down. The movement was fluid, predatory. "I think you are miserable and you are trying very, very hard not to show it." The observation was so fiercely accurate it completely stole my breath. "You do not know anything about me. I know you came alone to a family wedding where everyone else is paired off. I know that man who approached you a moment ago said something that made you want to disappear into the floorboards. I know you have been checking your phone every 15 minutes, calculating if it is polite to leave yet." His lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Am I wrong? That is very observant of you." I set my phone face down on the tablecloth, suddenly hyper-aware of how transparent my pain must be. "Are you a friend of the groom?" "Neither. A business associate of the Vance family." He gestured vaguely towards the men he had been speaking with. "They invited me, Dominic Vance." He extended his large, elegant hand. I hesitated for a fraction of a second before taking it. His palm was warm, his grip firm, and completely confident without being aggressive. "Evelyn Hayes." Evelyn. He tested my name on his tongue like it was a rare vintage, the bride's older sister, the one who came alone. Word travels fast in my family. In certain circles, everything travels fast. He released my hand slowly, his fingers trailing slightly against mine. "I have a proposition for you, Evelyn Hayes." This should have been the exact moment I made my excuses and left. The moment I remembered I was a tired pediatric nurse with a mountain of responsibilities, overdue bills, and absolutely no room in my chaotic life for mysterious, dangerously handsome strangers. Instead, I heard my own voice ask, "What kind of proposition?" Dominic leaned closer, his broad chest blocking out the rest of the room. His voice dropped so low it was meant only for me. "Dance with me, pretend to be mine for the rest of the evening. Let every single person in this room see that you are not alone, not pitied, and certainly not forgotten." I stared at him, my brain struggling to process the words. "You want me to pretend to be dating you, a complete stranger? Why not? It elegantly solves both of our problems." His expression remained unreadable, but a dangerous spark flickered in those whiskey eyes. "My associates are relentless about wanting me to settle down and present a softer image. Your family clearly enjoys weaponizing your single status against you. We could help each other." "That is insane." "Perhaps." He stood up smoothly, offering his hand to me once again. "But the next song is starting, Evelyn, and your arrogant ex-husband is currently watching us from across the room with a very confused, very jealous expression on his face. So what do you say, will you dance with me and let them all think you belong to a man who actually knows your worth?" The smart answer was no. The safe, responsible answer was a definitive no. I placed my hand in his and stood up. "One dance, that is all." His smile was absolutely devastating. "We will see about that." Dominic led me onto the polished dance floor with the effortless grace of a man who commanded every space he entered. His large hand settled firmly at the small of my back, searing heat through the thin, cheap fabric of my dress, while his other hand clasped mine. For a man built like a weapon, his touch was surprisingly gentle. "You dance well," I breathed as we began moving perfectly in sync with the music. My mother insisted on strict lessons when I was young. He guided me smoothly past a wealthy couple. She firmly believed a man should always know how to lead a woman properly. A shadow briefly crossed his striking features. "She passed away 2 years ago, cancer." "I am so sorry." The words felt hollow, but they were true. "She would have liked you," Dominic said, his gaze locking onto mine. "She had very strong opinions about women who could stand on their own 2 feet. Women who did not need a man to survive but chose one anyway." "Is that what you think I am doing right now? Choosing you?" I couldn't help the slight defensive edge in my voice. "We just met 10 minutes ago. This is entirely pretend." His hand pressed just a fraction more firmly against my lower back, pulling my body flush against his hard chest as we turned. "But pretend has a funny way of becoming intensely real, Evelyn, especially when 2 people are finally honest about what they crave." I should have pulled away. I should have firmly reminded him of the boundaries, but surrounded by the warmth of his body wrapped in the intoxicating scent of cedar and power, I found myself leaning closer. Around us, the whispers had already started. I caught glimpses of familiar faces staring at us in absolute shock. My mother's jaw had practically unhinged. Olivia looked thrilled. And Carter. Carter was staring at us from the edge of the bar, his knuckles white around his whiskey glass, his face tight with furious disbelief. "Your ex-husband is very, very interested in where my hands are right now," Dominic murmured against my ear, sending a jolt of pure electricity straight down my spine. "How do you even know he is my ex?" "Because of the way he looked at you earlier. Like he owned something precious, threw it in the trash, and is suddenly violently angry that another man is picking it up to treat it like gold." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Men like him are pathetic and entirely predictable." "You do not know anything about his situation." "I know he abandoned you when you needed him most. I know he married your cousin out of shallow convenience, and I know he is not worth a single one of the tears you have been fighting back all night." Dominic's eyes burned into mine. "Am I wrong?" I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. "You are incredibly presumptuous." "I am fiercely observant." He spun me gently. "And I am right, aren't I?" "Being right does not give you the right to say whatever you want to me." "No, but being honest does. Let me give you this victory tonight, Evelyn. Let me show them exactly what a woman like you deserves." When the song ended, he didn't let me go. He kept my hand securely in his thumb tracing slow hypnotic circles against my pulse point right there in the center of the ballroom for everyone to see. Monday morning arrived with the sharp, unforgiving buzz of my alarm clock at 5:30. I dragged myself out of bed after exactly 3 hours of restless sleep, my exhausted mind still replaying Saturday night in vivid, impossible fragments. Dominic's large hand resting possessively at the small of my back. The way Carter's face had drained of color when he saw us together. The sleek black business card Dominic had pressed into my palm when his private driver dropped me off at my apartment building, the heavy card stock practically burning a hole in my cheap kitchen counter where I had left it. Chloe was already awake when I checked her tiny bedroom. She was sitting on her rug building an elaborate castle with her plastic blocks and humming a sweet, off-key song. She looked up with those striking blue eyes that were pure Carter genetics, though thankfully, that was the only thing she had inherited from him. "Good morning, Mommy. Did you have fun at Aunt Olivia's wedding? Was she a pretty princess?" "She was very pretty, baby." I knelt down and kissed the top of her head, breathing in the comforting scent of strawberry baby shampoo that always clung to her fine hair. "Now get dressed, sweetheart. We have to leave in 40 minutes and Mommy cannot be late for the hospital." My grueling 12-hour shift at the pediatric center started at 7 sharp. I dropped Chloe at her early morning kindergarten program, fighting through Monday traffic to reach the hospital with exactly 2 minutes to spare. The pediatric ward welcomed me with its familiar chaotic symphony of beeping monitors, hushed voices, and the sharp scent of industrial bleach that had become my second skin. The morning passed in a dizzying blur of checking IV lines, distributing medications, and comforting a terrified 7-year-old boy who had just been admitted for a severe asthma attack. By noon, I had successfully managed to push thoughts of Dominic Vance and his ridiculous, intoxicating fake dating proposal to the back of my mind. This was my real life: sick children, overworked nurses, and calculating how to stretch my dwindling paycheck. There was no room for billionaire CEOs with whiskey-colored eyes and dangerous smiles. I was updating a patient chart at the main desk when Carter suddenly appeared in the sterile hallway. He should not have been able to get past the security desk without visitor authorization, but Carter had always possessed a terrifying talent for talking his way into places he absolutely did not belong. "We need to talk." He planted his athletic frame directly in front of the nurse's station, effectively blocking my path. "I am working, Carter. I did not look up from the medical tablet in my hands, and you are not supposed to be up here. The pediatric ward is restricted." I told the front desk I was looking for my daughter's pediatrician. His jaw was clenched tight, that familiar blue vein throbbing wildly at his temple, the universal sign that Carter Davis was losing his temper, which I should be able to do, by the way. "You never let me see Chloe." "You have never once asked to see Chloe." I finally met his eyes, keeping my voice dangerously low. I was hyper-aware of the other nurses pretending not to listen, and she is not a patient here. So that pathetic excuse will not hold up if I call security. Carter stepped closer, invading my personal space, lowering his voice to a hostile hiss. "Who the hell is Dominic Vance, Evelyn, and do not try to feed me some lie about meeting him on a dating app. I have been asking around. He is the CEO of Vance Holdings, but the guys at the country club say his family has deep ties to the Chicago underworld. He is dangerous." Maybe he is. I stood my ground, refusing to shrink back like I used to when we were married. Maybe his life does not revolve around impressing snobs at a golf course. "Now step aside before I call security myself." "Is he paying you?" The vile question stopped my heart cold. I stared at him, unable to comprehend the sheer audacity. "Is that what this is, Evelyn? Some sick arrangement where he gives you cash to play his arm candy? I always knew you were desperate but selling yourself. What kind of mother does that make you?" The accusations stung deeply, burning like acid in my veins. "Get out, Carter." My hands curled into tight fists at my sides. "You think because you married Harper for her family's trust fund, everyone else operates like a parasite too? I have never taken a single dime from you. And I certainly do not take money from anyone else. I work for every single thing my daughter has." "Then what does a man like Dominic Vance want with a broke single mother?" Carter sneered, looking me up and down with absolute disgust. "He is not going to stick around when he realizes what a pathetic mess your life actually is. He is twice the man you will ever be." I turned toward the emergency phone. "Security, please, to the third-floor pediatric desk. We have a hostile, unauthorized visitor." Carter cursed under his breath and turned on his heel. "This isn't over, Evelyn. I am not letting my daughter be exposed to a criminal." He stalked away before security arrived, leaving me violently shaking. I spent the rest of my shift running on pure adrenaline, my hands so unsteady that I had to ask a junior nurse to handle a tricky blood draw. When the shift finally ended at 7, I picked up Chloe, listened to her chatter happily about her art project, and drove us back to our tiny apartment. Sarah was already waiting by my door, as she did every Tuesday evening. It was our weekly tradition, the only real social life I had. She had brought Thai takeout and a facial expression that clearly stated she demanded answers. We ate in the cramped kitchen while Chloe watched cartoons in the living room. Sarah listened in stunned silence as I recounted the wedding, Dominic's proposal, and Carter's ambush at the hospital. Evelyn, this is completely insane. Sarah set down her chopsticks, her eyes wide with genuine fear. You know, Dominic Vance isn't just a CEO, right? There are rumors, dark rumors, things about his family running half the illegal operations in the city. You cannot get involved with a man like that. I am not involved with him. I aggressively pushed noodles around my paper carton. It was just one night, a favor to help each other save face. I haven't even spoken to him since he dropped me off. I was desperately trying to convince myself that I was safe, that the story ended there. By 9:30, Sarah had left, and I had just tucked a sleepy Chloe into her twin bed. I was standing in the kitchen washing the takeout containers when someone knocked on my apartment door. It was not a polite neighborly knock. It was heavy, insistent, demanding. I froze, the soapy sponge slipping from my fingers. I crept toward the door and peered through the scratched peephole. 2 massive men stood in the dimly lit hallway. They looked exactly like nightmares brought to life. Dark, expensive leather coats, thick necks, and cold, dead eyes. One of them had a jagged spiderweb tattoo creeping up his throat. Evelyn Hayes. The taller man spoke through the heavy wooden door. His voice was thick with a heavy Russian accent. "We know you are in there. Open the door. We need to talk about your new boyfriend, Dominic Vance." Every single survival instinct I possessed screamed at me to run. I slapped the deadbolt locked. "I do not know who you are talking about. Go away or I am calling the police." The second man chuckled, a dark, terrifying sound. "Go ahead and call them, little bird. They will not arrive in time. We just want to deliver a message from our boss, Viktor Volkov." He slid something under the crack of the door. I looked down, my blood turning to pure ice. It was a glossy photograph. It was a picture of me and Dominic at the wedding, his hand on my waist, our faces inches apart. But someone had taken a thick red marker and drawn a violent cross through my face, and next to my head there was a smaller photo attached. A photo of Chloe walking into her kindergarten this morning. "Dominic Vance thinks he can take our territory," the Russian man hissed through the wood. "He thinks he is untouchable, but every man has a weakness. Tell your fake billionaire boyfriend that if he doesn't surrender the shipping docks by Friday, we will pay you and your pretty little daughter another visit, and next time we will not knock." I heard their heavy footsteps retreat down the hallway. I collapsed against the door, my entire body violently trembling. I clutched the photos to my chest, a panicked sob tearing from my throat. They had followed me. They had followed my 5-year-old daughter. Carter was right. I had brought a monster's war right to my child's doorstep. With shaking hands, I pulled my phone from my scrub pocket. I bypassed the police. The police could not stop men like this. There was only one person who could. I dug the sleek black business card out of my purse and dialed the private number. He answered on the very first ring. "Evelyn." His deep voice sent a wave of desperate relief crashing over me. "Dominic." A choked sob broke free. 2 men, they just came to my apartment. They had heavy Russian accents. They slid photos under my door. Photos of us at the wedding. And photos of Chloe at her school. They said Viktor Volkov wants the shipping docks, or they are coming back for us. Silence. It was a heavy, terrifying, lethal silence. When Dominic finally spoke, the warmth in his voice was completely gone, replaced by a cold, murderous edge that made my breath catch. "Lock every deadbolt. Do not go near the windows. Pack a bag for you and your daughter. I will be there in exactly 8 minutes. If anyone tries to open that door before I get there, you take your daughter into the bathroom and you lock yourselves inside. Do you understand me, Evelyn?" "Yes." I wiped my tears, maternal adrenaline flooding my system. "I am coming for you. Hold on." The line went dead. I sprinted to Chloe's room, dragging my duffel bag from the closet. I shoved her favorite clothes, her stuffed rabbit, and my uniforms into the bag with frantic, clumsy hands. Chloe stirred, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Mommy, why are you crying? Are we going somewhere?" We are going on a surprise sleepover, sweetie. I forced the brightest, fakest smile of my life, my heart hammering against my ribs. Hurry now, put your shoes on. Exactly 8 minutes later, I heard the screech of tires outside my building, followed by heavy, rapid footsteps pounding up the stairwell. I grabbed the heaviest kitchen knife I owned and stood in front of Chloe. Evelyn, it is me. Open the door. I threw the deadbolt back. Dominic stood in the hallway looking like a god of war. He had shed his suit jacket, his dark dress shirt pulled tight across his broad chest, a gun visible in the shoulder holster strapped to his body. Behind him stood a massive, heavily scarred man scanning the hallway with a lethal weapon drawn. Dominic stepped inside, his golden eyes sweeping over me, checking for injuries. When he saw I was unharmed, the tension in his jaw relaxed by a millimeter. He looked down at the photograph I was still clutching. He saw the red cross over my face. He saw the picture of Chloe. A terrifying darkness completely consumed his expression. I am so sorry, Evelyn. His voice was raw, vibrating with barely contained rage. I never meant for my shadows to touch you. Franco grabbed their bags. We are leaving. Where are we going? I clutched Chloe tightly to my side. She was staring at the guns, her eyes wide with silent fear. To my penthouse, Dominic said softly, crouching down so he was eye level with my trembling daughter. His terrifying aura vanished, replaced by an astonishing gentleness. Hello, Chloe. My name is Dominic. We are going to go to my house now. It is very high up in the sky, and absolutely no one bad is ever allowed inside. Does that sound okay to you? Chloe looked at him, then at me. She nodded slowly. Dominic stood up, his gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that promised absolute devastation to anyone who dared to threaten us. I am taking you home, Evelyn, and I promise you Victor Volkov is going to bleed forever, daring to learn your name. The ride to the Gold Coast was a blur of neon city lights streaking past the heavily tinted windows of the armored SUV. The rain continued to batter the reinforced glass, but inside the spacious leather interior, the chaotic storm felt a million miles away. Franco drove with silent, practiced efficiency, checking the rearview mirror every few seconds to ensure we were not being followed. Dominic sat beside me in the back seat, his large frame positioned between me and the window. He had not said a word since we left my apartment building, but his presence was a heavy, comforting blanket. One of his large, warm hands rested securely over mine, his thumb tracing a slow, grounding pattern against my knuckles. Chloe had fallen asleep almost immediately, exhausted by the sudden disruption and the late hour. She was curled into my side, her tiny hands clutching her stuffed rabbit, completely oblivious to the dangerous world her mother had accidentally stepped into. We arrived at a sleek, hyper-modern skyscrapers towering over Lake Michigan. Franco drove us directly into a secured private underground garage, a private elevator requiring both a biometric scan and a keycard from Dominic took us straight to the top floor. When the polished steel doors finally slid open, I stepped out into a space that completely defied my understanding of wealth. Dominic's penthouse occupied the entire top 2 floors of the building. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture. Massive floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the dark lake and the glittering Chicago skyline. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive neutral tones, charcoal grays, deep navies, and rich leather. It smelled of that same intoxicating cedarwood and clean rain that clung to Dominic's skin. It was pristine. It was a fortress in the sky. The guest wing is down this hall, Dominic said softly, easily carrying our heavy duffel bags in one hand. Follow me, Evelyn. He led me to a bedroom that was easily 3 times the size of my entire apartment. A massive king-sized bed sat in the center of the room, piled high with plush white duvets and silk pillows. An ensuite bathroom gleamed with white marble and brushed gold fixtures. I gently laid Chloe down on the mattress, carefully pulling the heavy duvet over her small shoulders. She sighed in her sleep, burying her face into the soft pillows. I stood by the edge of the bed for a long time, just watching her chest rise and fall. My heart was still hammering, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had brought her into a war zone. I had allowed my pride at a stupid wedding to put a target on my innocent daughter's back. Dominic stood in the doorway watching us with an expression I could not fully read. He had removed his shoulder holster, leaving him in just his dark trousers and the fitted dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing heavily corded forearms. She is safe here, Evelyn. His deep voice broke the heavy silence in the room. I have 6 men downstairs monitoring the perimeter. The elevator is locked down. Absolutely no one gets onto this floor without my explicit authorization. I turned to face him, wrapping my arms defensively around my own waist. Who are you? Dominic, really? Carter said you were dangerous. He said your family ran the city. And those men tonight, the Russians, they knew exactly who you were. Dominic's jaw tightened. He took a slow step into the room, closing the distance between us until I could feel the heat radiating from his broad chest. I am a man who made a terrible miscalculation, he said quietly, his whiskey eyes filled with dark regret. I used you to send a message to my rivals to prove I was untouchable and moving on from the old ways. I thought keeping you close at that wedding would simply irritate your family. I severely underestimated Viktor Volkov's willingness to target civilians. That is my fault. And I will spend every second of every day making sure you never pay the price for my sins. You still did not answer my question. I looked up at him, refusing to back down. Tomorrow. He reached out his warm fingers, gently brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear. The touch was so tender it made my breath hitch. Tomorrow I will tell you everything, but tonight you are exhausted and you are trembling. Lock this door from the inside. Sleep. You are safe now, Evelyn. I swear it on my life. He stepped back and quietly closed the bedroom door, leaving me alone in the luxurious silence. I locked the heavy oak door as he suggested, but as I curled up next to Chloe on the massive bed, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't locking the door to keep Dominic Vance out. I was locking it to keep the rest of the world away. I woke up the next morning to the smell of fresh coffee and something sweet cooking. Sunlight poured through the massive windows, bathing the bedroom in a warm, golden glow. I checked the bed beside me, panic instantly spiking when I saw it was empty, but then I heard a sound that made me freeze. Chloe was giggling. I threw off the covers, tied my worn robe tightly around my waist, and hurried out of the bedroom. I followed the sound of laughter down the wide hallway and into the massive state-of-the-art kitchen. I stopped dead in my tracks. Dominic Vance, the ruthless billionaire CEO and apparent underworld boss, was standing at a massive marble island. He was wearing dark sweatpants that hung low on his narrow hips and a plain black t-shirt that stretched tight across his muscular shoulders. He was expertly flipping a pancake in a copper skillet. Sitting on a high bar stool across from him was Chloe. She was wearing her oversized pajamas, her feet swinging happily in the air, a smudge of flour on her nose. Now the trick to a perfect pancake, Dominic was saying in a serious conspiratorial tone, is to wait until the bubbles pop in the center before you flip it. It requires extreme patience. Do you think you have extreme patience, Chloe? Chloe giggled again, shaking her head vigorously. Nope, I just want the chocolate chips. Patience is a virtue, little one, but chocolate chips are a necessity. Dominic smiled, a real, genuine, breathtaking smile that completely transformed his harsh features. He slid the perfectly golden pancake onto a ceramic plate, arranging the chocolate chips into the shape of a smiley face before sliding it in front of her. Thank you, Mr. Dominic, Chloe beamed, immediately digging in with her fork. You are very welcome. He looked up and finally noticed me standing frozen in the doorway. The softness remained in his eyes as his gaze slowly swept over me, taking in my messy hair and worn robe like I was wearing haute couture. Good morning, Evelyn. Good morning. I stepped into the kitchen feeling entirely out of my depth. You cook. My mother believed a man who could not feed himself was a liability. He poured a steaming mug of black coffee and handed it to me. His fingers brushed mine, sending a familiar jolt of electricity up my arm. Did you sleep well? I did, surprisingly. I took a sip of the coffee. It was rich, dark, and perfect. Chloe, are you bothering Mr. Vance? He is not Mr. Vance, Mommy. Chloe corrected me with a mouthful of pancake. He is just Dominic, and he makes better pancakes than you do. I let out a startled laugh. Traitor! Dominic chuckled, a deep rumbling sound that warmed the entire room. I have an unfair advantage. I have professional-grade equipment. We spent the next hour in a surreal state of domestic bliss. Dominic had arranged for a private tutor to come to the Penthouse so Chloe would not miss her kindergarten lessons, and he had already called the hospital administrator, a personal friend of his, apparently to arrange a sudden paid week of emergency leave for me. He had handled everything with terrifying seamless efficiency. By late afternoon, the tutor had left, and Chloe was happily curled up on the massive living room rug, drawing a picture with a set of expensive art supplies Dominic had magically produced. I found him standing on the sprawling outdoor terrace, a glass of amber whiskey in his hand, looking out over the churning gray waters of Lake Michigan. The wind whipped at his dark hair, making him look wild and untamed. "You promised me answers today," I said quietly, stepping out into the crisp autumn air to join him. He didn't look at me right away. He took a slow sip of his whiskey. "Vance Holdings is a legitimate multi-billion-dollar real estate and logistics corporation. I built it from the ground up to be completely clean. It is my pride." But I prompted, leaning against the cold glass railing beside him. But he continued, his voice dropping low. "The Vance family legacy is much darker. My father and my grandfather ran the syndicates in this city. They controlled the ports, the unions, the politicians. When my father died 5 years ago, that crown passed to me. I did not want it, Evelyn. But in this world, if you show weakness, if you simply walk away, the vacuum creates a bloodbath. Factions like Viktor Volkov's Bratva tear the city apart trying to claim the throne. Innocent people get caught in the crossfire. So you became a king to keep the monsters in check." "Exactly." Dominic finally turned to look at me, his golden eyes searching my face for judgment, for fear. "I have spent 5 years systematically dismantling the illegal operations, moving our people into legitimate businesses, holding the line against the Russians who want to flood our streets with weapons and narcotics. Volkov hates me because I refuse to let him use my ports. He thought if he threatened you, he could break my focus. He could force me to surrender." He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body in the chilly air. "He made a fatal error, Evelyn. He thought you were a weakness. He did not realize that bringing you here, putting you under my roof, would only make me completely ruthless." I stared up at him, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. "You barely know me, Dominic. We danced one time." "Time is entirely irrelevant." He reached out his large hands, gently cupping my face. His thumbs stroked my cheekbones. "I saw you sitting at that table, holding your head high, while surrounded by people who wanted to tear you down. I felt the way you fit perfectly in my arms on that dance floor, and when I saw that terrified little girl eating pancakes in my kitchen this morning..." He stopped, his throat working as he swallowed hard. "Carter walked away from her," I whispered, tears suddenly pricking my eyes. "He left when I was pregnant because he said she would ruin his life. Carter Davis is a weak, pathetic fool who did not understand the absolute treasure he was holding." Dominic's voice was fiercely protective, vibrating with raw emotion. "He threw away a queen. He abandoned an angel. I will never make that mistake." "You are talking like this is real." My breath hitched as he stepped directly into my space, "like we aren't just pretending anymore. Evelyn." He leaned his forehead against mine, his breath mingling with mine. "I stopped pretending the exact second you said yes to that dance. You and Chloe are mine to protect now, and I will burn this entire city to ash before I let anyone take you away from me." I closed my eyes, letting the absolute certainty in his voice wash over me. For 5 years, I had fought every battle completely alone. I had been the shield for my daughter, the responsible nurse, the abandoned wife. I was so incredibly tired of being strong. Standing there on that balcony, wrapped in the protective embrace of Chicago's most dangerous man, for the very first time in my life, I finally felt safe. The illusion of our perfect isolated haven shattered on a rainy Friday afternoon. 3 days had passed since Dominic brought us to the Penthouse. 3 days of building a fragile, beautiful domestic routine. I had spent the morning watching Dominic help Chloe build an impossibly tall tower out of magnetic tiles, the terrifying underworld boss sitting cross-legged on the plush carpet explaining structural integrity to a 5-year-old. But the real world rarely respects closed doors. Franco entered Dominic's massive private study just after 2 o'clock. I was sitting on the leather sofa reading a book while Dominic reviewed logistics reports at his mahogany desk. Franco did not knock. His scarred face was grim, his posture rigid with coiled tension. "We found the leak, Dominic." Franco's deep voice held absolutely no warmth. "We know exactly who gave Volkov the photos from the wedding. We know who gave him Evelyn's address." Dominic slowly set his pen down. The temperature in the room plummeted instantly. "Who?" Franco turned his heavy gaze toward me, a flicker of genuine pity in his eyes. It was your cousin Evelyn, Marcus. The heavy hardcover book slipped from my fingers, hitting the rug with a muffled thud. Marcus, my cousin Marcus. That was impossible. Yes, he was a chronic gambler. Yes, he had borrowed money from our family for years and never paid a dime back. But to sell me out to the Russian mob, to put Chloe in the crosshairs of a ruthless syndicate. He owed the Bratva $50,000 from an underground poker tournament, Franco explained flatly. He had been dodging their collectors for months. When he saw your mother posting photos of the wedding on social media bragging about your new wildly wealthy boyfriend, Marcus recognized an opportunity. He traded your safety and the security codes to your apartment building in exchange for clearing his gambling debt. Bile rose rapidly in my throat. My own blood, my own family had served my daughter up to monsters to save his own skin. Where is he? Now! Dominic's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the lethal force of a loaded weapon. That is the complication. Franco stepped closer to the desk. Volkov did not just take the information, he took Marcus. They are holding him at an abandoned shipping warehouse in the industrial district. Volkov sent a message 10 minutes ago. He wants a face-to-face meeting tonight. If you do not show up and sign over the eastern shipping docks, Marcus dies. Let him die. The words tore out of my throat before I could stop them. Both men looked at me in stark surprise. I stood up, my hands trembling violently with a mixture of profound grief and volcanic rage. He put a target on a 5-year-old girl. He sold out his own family. Let Viktor Volkov have him. Family does not end where loyalty ends, Evelyn. Dominic stood walking around the heavy desk to stand in front of me. His golden eyes were dark, unreadable. If I leave him to bleed out in a warehouse, it sends a message that my protection is conditional, that anyone connected to me can be slaughtered without consequence. I have to go. Then I am going with you. Absolutely not. Dominic's hands instantly gripped my shoulders. You are staying right here where it is safe. I shook my head, stepping out of his protective hold. I am the leverage, Dominic. Marcus is my cousin. Volkov is using my face, my family, to back you into a corner. I will not sit in an ivory tower while men in dark rooms use my name as currency. If you are going to negotiate for my blood, I am going to be standing right beside you. He stared down at me, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle ticked fiercely in his cheek. He wanted to lock me in the bedroom. He wanted to post 10 guards at the door and wage this war alone. I could see the violent protective instinct warring with the deep respect he was beginning to hold for me. Fine, he finally breathed, his voice raw, but you stay behind me. You do not speak unless I tell you to, and if I say run, Evelyn, you do not look back. The warehouse sat on the very edge of the city's industrial district, a massive rusted structure looming against the gray, stormy sky. The air smelled heavy with ozone-rotting wood and the metallic tang of polluted lake water. 2 black sedans were already parked outside. Massive men in dark coats stood by the doors, their eyes tracking our armored SUV as Franco brought it to a slow, deliberate halt. Dominic reached across the leather seat and took my hand. His grip was an iron anchor. Are you ready? No, I forced a steady breath into my lungs. Let's go. We stepped out into the freezing drizzle. Franco flanked us on the left, his hand resting casually inside his jacket right over his weapon. Dominic kept me tucked securely against his side as we walked through the heavy, corrugated metal doors. The interior of the warehouse was exactly what nightmares were made of. Hollow echoing and dimly lit by a few sputtering halogen work lights. In the center of the vast concrete floor sat a metal folding table, and tied to a wooden chair near the table was Marcus. His face was a bruised, bloody mess. He was sobbing quietly, his expensive suit ruined. Sitting casually at the table, smoking a thin, dark cigarette, was a man who radiated absolute zero. Viktor Volkov. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with close-cropped silver hair and eyes the color of a winter sky. He looked like a wolf in a tailored suit. Dominic Vance. Volkov smiled, exposing perfectly white teeth. His English carried a thick, gravelly accent. And you brought the pretty nurse. How very romantic. Let him go, Volkov. Dominic's voice boomed through the empty space, commanding and completely devoid of fear. You have your meeting. The coward is no longer useful to you. Volkov took a slow drag of his cigarette. He was very useful. He told us all about your little fake romance, how you picked this tired single mother out of a crowd to play a game. But clearly, it is no longer a game, is it? You brought her to a war zone. You care. Volkov leaned forward, his pale eyes locking onto Dominic. I want the Eastern Docks. I want free passage for my shipments for the next 5 years. You sign the paper and you can take this gambling trash back home. You say no, and I put a bullet in his head, and my men will spend the next year hunting your pretty nurse and her little girl. I looked at Marcus. He was weeping openly now, begging me to save him, begging Dominic to give them what they wanted. He had sold my child to these monsters, and now he was begging for mercy. A sudden terrifying calm washed over me. The trembling in my hands completely stopped. I did not wait for Dominic to speak. I stepped out from behind his broad shoulder, ignoring the sharp warning hiss Franco let out. I walked directly up to the metal table. Volkov's amused expression faltered slightly as I slammed my palms down on the cold steel. You think you are a powerful man, I said. My voice was eerily steady, ringing clear through the cavernous warehouse. You think terrorizing a 5-year-old girl and holding a pathetic gambling addict hostage makes you a king. It does not. It makes you a coward. Evelyn, Marcus whimpered. Shut up. He will kill us. I ignored him, keeping my eyes locked on Volkov's icy stare. Dominic does not owe you the Eastern Docks. I do not owe you fear. You came to my home. You threatened my child. You want to know what kind of woman I am. I am a mother who has nothing left to lose, so go ahead, shoot him. The silence in the warehouse was absolute. It was deafening. Even Volkov's massive guards seemed frozen in shock. No one spoke to the head of the Bratva like this. You think you can bluff me, little bird? Volkov's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. I am not bluffing. I stood tall, channeling every ounce of pain and exhaustion from the last 5 years into a spine of solid steel. You kill him, you get nothing. Dominic goes to war, and he will not stop until your entire syndicate is buried under the river. But if you are smart, you will listen to the counteroffer. I stepped back, yielding the floor to Dominic. Dominic stepped forward, his whiskey eyes blazing with a mixture of shock and profound consuming pride. He seamlessly took control of the momentum I had just created. You heard my queen, Dominic said smoothly, the title sending a violent shiver down my spine. The Eastern Docks are off the table, but I will give you the Southside rail yards. Volkov frowned. The rail yards, they are practically abandoned. They are abandoned because the city is rezoning them next month for commercial development. Dominic lied flawlessly, his face a perfect mask of stone, but they connect directly to the state lines. You want free passage, you take the rail yards. In exchange, Marcus walks, and you sign a formal peace treaty. No more targeting civilians, no more touching my family. My woman and her child are untouchable. Do we have a deal, Victor? Or do we go to war over a gambler who cannot even pay his debts? Volkov stared at Dominic, then shifted his gaze back to me. He studied my face for a long, tense moment. He slowly crushed his cigarette out on the metal table. Women who speak truth to power are incredibly rare, Volkov murmured. My late wife was one. I was smart enough to listen to her. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. Take the rail yards, take your cousin. We have a treaty, Vance, but keep the nurse close. She is far more dangerous than you are. The Russian guards cut Marcus's bonds. He collapsed to the floor, sobbing his gratitude. Franco dragged him up by his collar, hauling him out of the warehouse like a bag of garbage. I did not wait to see the rest. The adrenaline was rapidly draining from my system, leaving my legs feeling like water. I turned and walked quickly out of the warehouse, bursting out into the freezing rain. I made it to the side of the armored SUV before my knees finally gave out. Dominic caught me before I hit the wet pavement. His large, strong arms wrapped around me, hauling me flush against his hard chest. He pinned me against the side of the vehicle, the cold rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead, his breathing harsh and ragged. You are insane. He framed my face with his large hands, his thumbs aggressively wiping the raindrops from my cheeks. You are completely terrifyingly insane. You could have been killed. I had to. I gasped for air, gripping the wet lapels of his shirt. I could not let them think I was just a weakness they could use against you. I had to show them I belonged in your world. His golden eyes burned into my soul. You belong with me. And then he kissed me. It was not a gentle, questioning kiss. It was an explosion. It was the violent collision of two people who had just walked through the fire and survived. His mouth crashed down on mine, hot and demanding tasting of rain and dark promises. I tangled my hands in his wet hair, pulling him closer, rising up on my toes to meet his desperate intensity. Every single barrier I had built around my heart over the last 5 years instantly incinerated. His tongue swept into my mouth, claiming every inch, stealing my breath and replacing it with pure, intoxicating fire. His large hands slid down to grip my waist, lifting me slightly off the ground, pressing my body flush against his. I felt the heavy weight of his gun holster pressing into my chest, a stark reminder of the dangerous man he was. But in his arms I was not afraid. I was electric. I was alive. When we finally broke apart, we were both panting, our foreheads resting against each other in the pouring rain. Fake dating Dominic whispered hoarsely against my swollen lips, a dark, wicked smile curving his mouth. I laughed a breathless, broken sound and rested my hand over his racing heart. Not anymore. Not ever again. He kissed my forehead, pulling me safely into the warm interior of the SUV. You are mine, Evelyn, and God help any man who tries to tell me otherwise. 2 weeks passed since the violent confrontation in the rusted warehouse, 2 weeks of breathing actual clean air. The peace treaty with the Bratva held perfectly. Viktor Volkov kept his men on their side of the city, and the suffocating shadow of the Russian syndicate finally lifted from our lives. With the threat neutralized, I insisted on returning to my regular shifts at the pediatric hospital. Dominic had not loved the idea. The ruthless CEO who commanded an underground empire had spent an entire hour pacing our bedroom, offering to buy me a private clinic, fund my return to medical school, or simply let me never work another day in my life. But he also deeply respected my independence. He understood that healing children was not just a job for me, it was my calling. We compromised. I went back to work, but Franco personally drove me, and an invisible security detail watched the hospital perimeter. It felt incredibly grounding to fall back into the familiar rhythm of IV checks and medication rounds. For 12 hours a day, I was just Nurse Evelyn again. But the moment my shift ended, I stepped into the back of a luxury armored SUV and returned to a penthouse where a dangerous, intensely devoted billionaire was waiting for me. It was a Tuesday evening, a cold, biting wind sweeping off Lake Michigan, when the ghosts of my past decided to make one final desperate stand. My shift ended at 7. I walked out to the hospital's dimly lit parking garage, pulling my heavy coat tight against the chill. Franco had texted that he was parked on the second level, delayed by a minor traffic accident blocking the ramp. I told him I would walk up to meet him. I was halfway across the concrete floor when a figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. "We need to talk, Evelyn." Carter. He looked terrible. His usually perfectly styled blonde hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and he smelled faintly of cheap scotch and stale desperation. The arrogant smirk he had worn at the wedding was completely gone, replaced by a wild, frantic energy that immediately put me on edge. I kept walking, refusing to break my stride. "I have absolutely nothing to say to you, Carter. Get out of my way." He stepped sideways, blocking my path to the stairwell. "I know what happened," he hissed, his eyes darting nervously around the empty garage. "I heard the whispers at the country club. Your new boyfriend nearly started a mob war. He had people held hostage in a warehouse. You are exposing my daughter to violent criminals." I stopped, a cold, hard laugh escaping my lips. "Your daughter. You have not paid a single dime in child support. You have not called her on her birthday. You walked out on us when I was 5 months pregnant because you said a baby would ruin your lifestyle. You do not get to call her your daughter now. I am her biological father," Carter spat, stepping closer, "and no judge in this state will let a child live with a mafia boss. I have already spoken to a lawyer. I am filing for full emergency custody tomorrow morning. I am going to take Chloe away from you, Evelyn. I will prove you are an unfit mother who brings gang violence to her doorstep." The threat hung in the freezing air, heavy and venomous. 5 years ago, those words would have broken me. I would have collapsed in tears, terrified of his wealth and his cruel family. But I was not that exhausted, terrified girl anymore. I was a woman who had stared down a Russian syndicate boss. I was a woman loved by a king. "Are you completely finished?" A dark, lethal voice echoed through the concrete garage. Carter physically jumped, spinning around. Dominic stepped out of the shadows near the elevator bank. He moved with the slow, terrifying grace of an apex predator circling a wounded animal. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal overcoat, his golden eyes completely devoid of mercy. Behind him stood Franco, looking massive and ready for violence. "You." Carter swallowed hard, taking a cowardly step back. "Stay away from me. I am well within my legal rights to protect my child." Dominic did not shout. He did not even raise his voice. But the sheer crushing weight of his presence made the temperature in the garage drop 10 degrees. "Your child," Dominic stopped beside me, casually placing a warm, protective hand at the small of my back. "How fascinating, because according to the state registry, you surrendered your parental rights the moment you refused to sign her birth certificate to avoid financial liability." Carter's face drained of color. "That is a private family matter." "Not anymore." Dominic snapped his fingers. Franco stepped forward, pulling a thick, heavy manila folder from his jacket and tossing it effortlessly onto the hood of a nearby parked car. "Let us discuss your legal rights," Dominic said smoothly, his eyes locking onto my ex-husband like crosshairs. "Inside that folder is a meticulously documented record of $65,000 in unpaid child support, complete with the compounded interest you owe Evelyn. There is also a drafted petition for immediate wage garnishment and asset seizure." "You cannot do that." Carter's voice cracked. "I do not have that kind of liquid cash right now." I know Dominic smiled, a sharp, terrifying expression, because the rest of that folder contains the forensic accounting my team ran on your personal finances. You have been quietly embezzling from your new wife's family trust fund to cover your bad investments. Nearly $200,000 missing, Carter. Carter looked like he was going to vomit. His knees literally buckled, forcing him to lean heavily against the concrete pillar to stay upright. How did you get that?" "I own half the financial institutions in this city." Dominic stepped closer, towering over the broken man. "Your father-in-law is a very proud, very unforgiving man. If he sees these bank statements, he will not just divorce you from his pregnant daughter. He will press federal charges. You will spend the next 10 years in a minimum security prison, and you will be completely penniless when you get out." "What do you want?" Carter whispered, staring at the folder like it was a live explosive. "I want you to disappear." Dominic stated, his voice a low, lethal rumble. "You will sign a permanent, irrevocable surrender of any future claims to Chloe. You will stay exactly 1,000 feet away from Evelyn at all times. You will never speak her name. You will never look in her direction. You will go back to your miserable, fraudulent life, and you will pray to God that I never have a reason to think about you again. Do we have an absolute understanding?" "Yes." Carter was weeping now, a pathetic, humiliating sound. "Yes, just do not show Harper's father the files. I will sign whatever you want." Franco tossed a sleek pen onto the folder. "Sign it now." Carter practically scrambled to the car hood, his hands shaking so violently he could barely grip the pen. He scrawled his signature across the heavy legal documents, signing away his last pathetic attempt to control my life. When he was done, he did not look at me. He turned and practically ran toward the stairwell, fleeing like a frightened rat. Dominic watched him go in absolute disgust. Franco quietly gathered the signed documents and stepped away to give us privacy. I stood completely still, staring at the empty space where my nightmare had just dissolved. 5 years of fear, 5 years of feeling inadequate, of worrying he would one day use his wealth to steal my daughter. Gone, obliterated in exactly 3 minutes of calculated corporate warfare. Dominic turned to me, his dark expression instantly softening. He reached out, pulling my coat tighter around my shoulders to block the freezing wind. "Are you all right, Evelyn? Did he touch you?" I shook my head, my throat tight with overwhelming emotion. "You destroyed him. You didn't even lay a hand on him, and you completely destroyed him." "I told you I protect what is mine." Dominic cupped my face, his thumbs gently brushing my cold cheeks. "I do not just fight with fists and bullets, Evelyn. I fight with lawyers, banks, and leverage. I wanted to ensure that pathetic coward could never ever cast a shadow over your life again. You are free of him, completely free." I surged forward, throwing my arms around his neck, burying my face in the warmth of his heavy coat. "I love you." The words tore out of me, desperate and honest and absolutely true. "I love you so much it terrifies me." Dominic let out a shuddering breath, his strong arms wrapping around me, lifting me right off the cold concrete. He buried his face in my neck, pressing a burning kiss against my pulse point. Do not be terrified, my queen. Let me be the only dangerous thing in your life. 2 nights later, the final ghost of my past was laid to rest. My parents had invited us to an intimate family dinner at a high-end steakhouse downtown to celebrate my father's retirement. It was the first time we were seeing them since the chaotic night of the wedding. When Dominic and I arrived, walking hand in hand with Chloe skipping happily between us, the atmosphere in the private dining room shifted. My mother, who had spent my entire adult life criticizing my choices, practically beamed. My father stood up and shook Dominic's hand with profound, genuine respect. Harper was there, sitting quietly at the end of the table. She was heavily pregnant and looked utterly exhausted. Carter was nowhere to be found. He is on a business trip, Harper had lied smoothly when my mother asked, though her eyes avoided mine. I didn't expose him. I didn't need to. Dominic's silent dismantling of his life was justice enough. Harper would discover the truth about her husband's embezzlement on her own terms, but I no longer carried the burden of his sins. The dinner was a revelation. Dominic effortlessly navigated the complex family dynamics. He discussed municipal politics with my father, charmed my mother by complimenting her dress, and patiently answered my sister Olivia's barrage of questions about his international restaurant holdings. But it was watching him with Chloe that completely healed my heart. When the waiter brought out the dessert course, Chloe accidentally knocked her glass of water over, soaking the edge of the pristine white tablecloth. My mother instantly stiffened, preparing to deliver a sharp scolding about manners. Before she could speak, Dominic smoothly grabbed his own cloth napkin, soaking up the spill with a completely unbothered smile. It is just water, Chloe, he said gently, completely diffusing the tension. In fact, I think the table looks much better hydrated now. Chloe giggled, the panic leaving her blue eyes. Dominic cut her slice of chocolate cake into perfect bite-sized pieces and slid the plate back in front of her. My father watched the interaction, then raised his wine glass, looking directly at Dominic. A man who knows how to handle a crisis with grace is a rare thing. You are good to them, Dominic. Welcome to the family. Dominic raised his glass in return, his whiskey eyes finding mine across the table, burning with a promise of forever. Thank you, sir, but Evelyn and Chloe are the ones who gave me a family. I sat back in my chair, surrounded by the warm glow of the restaurant, listening to my daughter laugh and my family converse in actual harmony. I looked at the dark, dangerous, beautiful man sitting beside me, the man who had pulled me out of the shadows and built a fortress around my heart. The humiliation of the wedding felt like a lifetime ago. The fake dating arrangement was a distant memory. This was my reality now. A reality built on absolute trust, fierce protection, and a love so deep it rewrote the stars. November arrived in Chicago with a bitter chill dusting the sprawling city streets with the first shimmering frost of the season. But inside the secure walls of the Penthouse, my world had absolutely never been warmer. A full month had passed since the terrifying night in the rusted warehouse. A month since Dominic Vance had completely destroyed my ex-husband with nothing more than a manila folder and a lethal promise. The fake relationship that had started as a desperate shield at my sister's wedding had seamlessly transformed into the most profoundly real, deeply anchoring force in my entire life. It was a Saturday evening when Dominic told me to dress up. He had completely cleared his corporate schedule, handed his encrypted phones to Franco, and instructed me to wear the breathtaking emerald green silk gown he had ordered custom-made for me in Paris. When I stepped out of the bedroom, the heavy silk sweeping gracefully across the hardwood floor, Dominic was waiting in the grand foyer. He wore a classic midnight blue tuxedo that molded perfectly to his broad shoulders, making him look devastatingly handsome and dangerously powerful. His whiskey-colored eyes darkened the absolute second he saw me, a familiar, intoxicating heat flaring in his gaze. "You are a vision, Evelyn," he murmured, closing the distance between us to press a warm, lingering kiss to my bare shoulder. Breathtaking. "Where are we going?" I smiled, smoothing my hands over the lapels of his immaculate jacket. "And where is Chloe?" Chloe is currently on a highly classified top-secret mission with Sarah and Franco. Dominic replied, a wicked boyish smirk playing on his lips. As for us, I am taking my queen out for dinner. Franco's armored SUV drove us through the glittering, frost-kissed streets of downtown Chicago, pulling up to the velvet-roped entrance of Vance Prime, Dominic's crown jewel in his restaurant empire. The general manager was waiting on the sidewalk, bowing his head respectfully as he opened my door. Instead of leading us to the bustling main dining room, the manager guided us to the private, glass-walled elevator. We rode it past the first floor, the doors finally gliding open to the exclusive second level. I stepped out and completely lost my breath. Dominic had closed the entire second floor to the public. The massive, elegant space was completely empty of other patrons, but it was far from bare. Thousands of flickering white candles were strategically placed around the room, casting a warm, golden glow over the polished mahogany and crystal. Thousands of white roses, my absolute favorite, cascaded from the ceiling fixtures and wrapped around the structural pillars, filling the air with a sweet, intoxicating perfume. In the far corner, a live string quartet played a slow, sweeping romantic melody. Dominic, I whispered, pressing my hands to my mouth, you closed the entire floor just for us. I would close the entire city if it meant I could have you all to myself for one night, he replied smoothly, taking my hand and leading me to a beautifully set table right by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the dark, churning lake. The dinner was a masterpiece of culinary art, but I could barely focus on the exquisite food. My entire universe was completely narrowed down to the striking man sitting across from me. He watched me with such intense, unwavering devotion that it made my pulse race exactly like it had on that very first night we danced. When the waiter cleared our dessert plates and poured the final glass of rare vintage champagne, the string quartet seamlessly shifted into the exact same slow melody that had been playing at my sister's wedding, the song that had started everything. Dominic stood up from his chair. He walked around the table, taking my hand and gently pulling me to my feet. Exactly 2 months ago, I walked into a crowded ballroom looking for leverage. Dominic said, his deep baritone vibrating with raw emotion. I was a man surrounded by shadows, holding the weight of an underworld empire, completely convinced I was meant to walk in the dark forever. And then I saw you. He brought my hand to his lips, kissing my trembling knuckles. I saw a woman sitting entirely alone, holding her head high, while surrounded by people who were too blind to see her immense worth. I offered you a fake contract, a temporary arrangement to save face. It was the most brilliant, entirely selfish calculation I have ever made. Because in trying to use you to protect my empire, you became my entire world. Tears blurred my vision, hot and fast spilling over my eyelashes. You saved my life, Evelyn, not from bullets or rival syndicates, but from a life completely devoid of light. You gave me a home. You gave me a daughter I would gladly burn the world down to protect. Dominic released my hand and slowly dropped down onto one knee. My heart completely stopped. The powerful billionaire CEO, the king of Chicago's shadows, was kneeling on the polished hardwood floor looking up at me with his soul entirely bare. Just then, the private elevator chimed softly. The polished doors slid open. Chloe stepped out. She was wearing a beautiful white tulle dress, her blonde hair styled in a perfect crown braid. She was beaming with absolute pride, walking carefully across the restaurant floor, holding a small black velvet box in her tiny hands. Sarah and Franco stood by the elevator, both of them wiping tears from their eyes. Chloe walked right up to Dominic and proudly handed him the velvet box. Mission accomplished, Dominic, she whispered loudly, making a wet, joyful laugh completely tear from my throat. Thank you, my little angel, Dominic whispered back, kissing her cheek before turning his blazing golden eyes back to me. He opened the box. Resting inside was a diamond so spectacular, so breathtakingly flawless, it caught the candlelight and threw rainbows across the dark room. Evelyn Hayes, Dominic said, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. This is no longer a contract. This is my permanent, unbreakable vow. I vow to protect you, to cherish you, and to worship the ground you walk on until my very last breath. Let me be your shield. Let me be your husband. Will you marry me? I looked at the breathtaking ring. I looked at my beautiful, smiling daughter standing safely by his side. I looked at the terrifying, magnificent man who had pieced my completely shattered heart back together. Yes, I sobbed, completely abandoning my composure as I dropped to my knees right in front of him. Yes, a million times yes. Dominic slid the heavy, perfect diamond onto my trembling finger. Then his strong arms wrapped completely around both me and Chloe, pulling his family into a fierce, unbreakable embrace. The string quartet swelled, filling the candlelit room with a sweeping crescendo. I buried my face in Dominic's strong shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent of cedar and safety. I had walked into that family wedding as a broken, humiliated single mother. I was leaving this restaurant as the fiercely protected, endlessly loved queen of Dominic Vance's entire empire. The shadows had finally receded. The fake dating was officially over. My real life, my perfect, beautiful, fiercely protected forever, had just begun. If you enjoyed this emotional journey, let me know in the comments below. Who was your favorite character and what scene made your heart beat the fastest? Don't forget to share your thoughts and stay tuned for more epic romance stories.